The next morning, Maya woke up with the Chopin melody still playing in her head. She had barely slept, tossing and turning as memories she had tried to bury kept surfacing. The sheet music sat on her kitchen table where she had left it the night. Before mocking her with its familiar notes, she made coffee and sat down across from the music, staring at it while she ate her breakfast. Every few minutes, her fingers would unconsciously tap out the rhythm on the table. This was dangerous territory, and she knew it. At work, Maya found it impossible to concentrate. She worked as a data analyst for a small marketing firm, a job that was perfectly ordinary and far removed from the world of classical music. Her co-workers knew nothing about her past, and she preferred it that way. But today, even the comfort of spreadsheets and statistics couldn't quiet the storm in her mind. "You seem distracted today," observed her cubicle neighbor Beth during their lunch break. "Everything okay?" Maya forced a smile. "Just tired. Had trouble sleeping last night." What she couldn't tell Beth was that she had spent most of the night remembering things she had worked years to forget. The memory of her first piano competition at age 7, when she had beaten kids twice her age. The way her parents' faces had lit up with pride and ambition that day. The morning practices that started at 5 a.m. and evening lessons that went until 9 p.m. The way her childhood had slowly disappeared, placed by scales, arpeggios, and endless performances. That afternoon, Maya received a text from Jessica, her classmate from piano class. "Hey, I was thinking about what Professor Williams said yesterday. That piece he gave you seems really hard. Want to meet up this weekend and practice together? I could help you with the basic parts." Maya stared at the message for a long time before responding. Jessica's offer was sweet, but it made Maya's situation even more complicated. How could she explain that she didn't need help with the basic parts without revealing that she had once performed this piece for thousands of people? "Thanks for the offer," she texted back. "Let me try working on it alone first and see how it goes." The truth was, Maya had been avoiding her piano at home for 2 days now. Every time she walked past it, she felt a pull so strong it scared her. The muscle memory was still there, waiting just beneath the surface. She knew that if she sat down and played the Chopin piece just once, all her careful walls would come crashing down by Thursday. Word had spread through the entire piano class about Maya's challenging assignment. When she arrived for their weekly elite lesson, she could feel eyes on her from the moment she walked in. The whispered conversations stopped when she passed, replaced by sympathetic looks and encouraging smiles. "How's the practice going?" asked Robert, the retired accountant, as she took her usual seat in the back.
"Oh."
Slowly, Maya replied, which wasn't exactly a lie. She hadn't practiced at all. Professor Williams seemed to notice her discomfort. During the group lesson, he kept glancing in her direction, as if trying to read her thoughts. When he announced individual practice time, Maya's heart sank.
Ow.
She would have to go to the piano and pretend to struggle with a piece she could play in her sleep. She walked to the practice piano with heavy steps, aware that several classmates were watching her. Placing the sheet music on the stand, she positioned her hands over the keys and began to play. But something went wrong. Instead of the deliberate mistakes and hesitation she had planned, her fingers seemed to have a mind of their own. The opening measures flowed out naturally, with proper phrasing and dynamics. For just a moment, Maya forgot where she was, and let herself feel the music. The melody sang under her fingers, bringing back the joy she had once felt when playing this piece. Caught herself just in time, forcing her hands to stumble and adding some wrong notes. But the damage was done. She had played beautifully for nearly 30 seconds, and she could see the confusion on her classmates' faces. "That sounded really good for a minute there," said Linda, the school teacher, who had been listening nearby. "Much better than last week." Maya felt her cheeks burn. "I guess I got lucky with that part." But Professor Williams had heard it too. He appeared at her side, his expression thoughtful. "Maya, could I speak with you after class tonight?" The rest of the lesson passed in a blur. Maya barely heard the professor's instructions about rhythm and timing. All she could think about was the conversation waiting for her at the end of class. Had she blown her cover? Was he going to ask her directly about her background? When the other students had packed up and left, Professor Williams pulled up a chair next to the piano where Maya still sat. "I am going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," he said gently. "Have you played piano before taking this class?" Maya's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind dozens of times. But now that it was here, she couldn't find the words. I took some lessons as a child, she said carefully. Oh, but that was a long time ago. Professor Williams nodded slowly. Long ago? And what level did you reach? The questions felt like tiny knives, each one cutting closer to the truth she had been hiding. Maya looked down at her hands, still resting on the piano keys. These hands had once been insured for millions of dollars. They had been photographed for magazine covers and had signed autographs for countless fans. Now they were shaking with fear. I played until I was 18, she admitted quietly. I was pretty advanced. How advanced? Professor Williams pressed gently. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her secret becoming too heavy to carry. I was a professional. I performed with orchestras and made recordings. I was what they called a child prodigy. The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Professor Williams was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Didn't you tell me? He asked finally. Why are you in a beginner's class? Maya felt tears threatening to spill over. Because I haven't played seriously in 14 years. Because the pressure nearly destroyed me. Because I needed to start over and remember why I fell in love with music in the first place. She told him about the competitions that started when she was 6 years old. The managers and agents who controlled every aspect of her life. The way. She had been homeschooled so she could practice 8 hours a day. The breakdown she had at 18 that made her walk away from everything she had ever known. I enrolled in your class because I wanted to feel like a normal person learning piano for fun, she explained. I wanted to remember what it felt like. To play without judges watching, without critics reviewing, without my entire future depending on every note being perfect. Professor Williams listened without judgment, his expression growing more understanding with each revelation. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. So, this chop and piece, he said finally, you've played it before. Maya nodded, wiping her eyes many times. I first learned it when I was 12, performed it at Carnegie Hall when I was 16. And now I've put you in an impossible position, Professor Williams said, understanding dawning in his voice. You can either play it badly and disappoint everyone, including yourself, or play it well and reveal who you really are. I don't know what to do, Maya whispered. I came here to heal, but I feel like I'm right back where I started, trapped by expectations and afraid to be myself. Professor Williams stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where a few students were still saying goodbye to each other. Maya, he said finally, maybe the healing isn't about hiding who you are. Maybe it's about finding a way to be who you are on your own terms. As she drove home that night, Maya realized that her secret was no longer entirely her own. Professor Williams knew the truth now, but somehow that felt like a relief rather than a burden. For the first time in months, she found herself looking forward to sitting at her piano, but she still had no idea what she was going to do. About the recital that was now just 5 weeks away. The weeks following Maya's confession to Professor Williams passed in a strange blur. He had kept her secret, as promised, but she could feel his eyes on her during every class. He no longer pushed her about practicing the chop and piece, but his knowing looks made her stomach twist with anxiety. Maya had started practicing at home, but not the way anyone might expect. She would sit at her piano for hours, playing simple scales and beginner exercises, trying to convince herself that this was enough. But every time she looked at the chop and sheet music sitting on top of her piano, her fingers would itch to play it properly. The other students in her class had become increasingly worried about her. Jessica had texted her multiple times, offering to help. Robert had even brought her a book about overcoming performance anxiety, thinking that was her problem. Their kindness made everything worse, because Maya knew she was lying to people who genuinely cared about her. I don't think she's going to be able to do it, she overheard Linda whisper to another classmate before one evening session. That piece is just too hard for someone at her level. Professor Williams should give her something easier. Maya pretended not to hear, but the comment stung, not because it hurt her pride, but because she realized how much her classmates had come to mean to her. They had accepted her as one of them, cheered for her small victories, and supported her struggles. The thought of disappointing them was almost worse than the thought of revealing her secret. 3 weeks before the recital, Professor Williams made an announcement that changed everything. "I want everyone to know that we'll be opening the recital to the public this year," he said during class. "The community center is excited to showcase what our adult learners can accomplish. We expect quite a few people to attend." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. A public recital meant more than just family members and friends. It meant strangers, possibly people from the local music community, maybe even music teachers from other schools. The risk of being recognized suddenly became very real. After class, she approached Professor Williams with shaking hands. "I can't do the recital," she said quietly. "Please, can you give the Chopin piece to someone else?" Professor Williams studied her face for a moment. "Maya, what are you really afraid of?" The question hit her like a physical blow. What was she afraid of? She had told herself it was about protecting her privacy, about maintaining the peaceful life she had built. But standing there in the empty classroom, she realized the truth was much deeper. "I'm afraid that if I play the way I can really play, I'll remember how much I loved it," she whispered. "And I'm afraid that once I remember, I won't be able to stop. I'll get pulled back into that world and I'll lose myself again." Professor Williams nodded slowly. "Or maybe you'll remember that the music was never the problem. Maybe the problem was letting other people control how and why you played." His words followed Maya home that night. She sat in her living room, staring at her piano, replaying every conversation she had had with her classmates over the past few months. They had never once asked her to be anything other than herself. They had never judged her for playing slowly or making mistakes. They had simply been happy to share their love of music with each other. The night before the recital, Maya couldn't sleep at all. She had practiced the Chopin piece exactly twice in the past month, both times stopping after just a few measures because the emotions it brought up were too intense. She had no idea what she was going to do when she walked onto that stage. The day of the recital arrived, gray and rainy. Maya spent the morning cleaning her apartment, doing laundry, anything to keep her mind busy. But by afternoon, she knew she had to make a decision. She sat down at her piano and opened the Chopin sheet music for what she told herself might be the last time. Her fingers found the keys almost automatically. The opening measures flowed out like water, pure and natural. But this time, instead of stopping, she kept playing. The muscle memory was still there, every note exactly where it should be. More than that, the emotion was there too. The joy, the passion, the pure love of music that had first made her fall in love with the piano when she was 5 years old. By the time she finished the piece, tears were streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of recognition. This was who she was. This was what she had been born to do. And she had been hiding from it for 14 years. The community center was buzzing with activity. When Maya arrived that evening, families filled the small auditorium. And she could see several people she didn't recognize, including what looked like music teachers from the local high school. Her hands started shaking again, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like anticipation rather than fear. She found her classmates backstage, all of them nervous and excited. Jessica was practicing her simple version of Amazing Grace for the 100th time. Robert was doing breathing exercises to calm his nerves. Linda was helping another student with her dress. "Maya," Jessica called out when she saw her. "How are you feeling? Are you ready for your big moment?" Before Maya could answer, Professor Williams appeared at her side. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" he asked quietly. They stepped into a corner where no one could hear them. "I need to know what you've decided," he said. "Are you going to play the piece as written, or are you going to continue pretending?" Maya looked out at her classmates, these people who had become like family to her over the past few months. Then she looked through the curtain at the audience, filled with supportive families and curious community members. "I'm going to play it," she said quietly. "I'm going to play it the way it's meant to be played." Professor Williams smiled. "Good, but Maya, I need to prepare you for something. Once you play that piece the way you can really play it, there's no going back. People are going to ask questions. Your life might change. Maya nodded. I know, but I realized something today. I've been so afraid of being controlled by music. Again, that I've been controlling it instead. That's just another kind of prison. The recital began with the newest students, the ones who had started just a few weeks ago. Maya watched from the wings as they proudly played their simple melodies, their faces glowing with accomplishment. The audience applauded warmly for each performance, no matter how basic. Then came her classmates from the longer-term group. Jessica played her Amazing Grace beautifully, with only one small mistake that no one but Maya probably noticed. Robert got through his Bach minuet without stopping, pumping his fist in victory when he finished. The audience loved every minute of it. Finally, Professor Williams took the stage to introduce the final performance of the evening. Our last performer tonight is Maya Chen, he said. She'll be playing Chopin's Minute Waltz, a challenging piece that requires both technical skill and musical maturity. Maya heard her name and felt her legs go weak. This was it. It's the moment of truth. She could still back out, claim she was sick, play it poorly on purpose. But as she walked toward the stage, she caught sight of her classmates in the wings. We're all watching her with such hope and encouragement in their eyes. Jessica gave her a thumbs up. Robert mouthed, "You've got this." Linda blew her a kiss for luck. Maya sat down at the grand piano and adjusted the bench. The auditorium fell completely silent. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she wasn't the scared, hiding woman who had enrolled in beginner piano class 6 months ago. She was simply Maya, someone who loved music and wanted to share that love with the people who had come to mean so much to her. She took a deep breath and began to play. The transformation was immediate and complete. The Chopin Minute Waltz flowed from her fingers with a grace and power that filled every corner of the auditorium. Every note was perfect, every phrase shaped with the kind of musical understanding that takes decades to develop. But more than the technical perfection, there was something else in her playing. There was joy, there was freedom. There was the sound of someone finally coming home to themselves. The audience sat in stunned silence as the music washed over them. This wasn't what anyone had expected from a beginner's recital. This was the playing of a master musician, someone who understood not just the notes on the page, but the soul of the music itself. The final notes of the Chopin waltz hung in the air like magic. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the entire auditorium was completely silent. Maya sat perfectly still at the piano, her hands resting on the keys, hardly daring to breathe. She had done it. She had played the piece exactly as she felt it, with all the skill and emotion she possessed. Then the silence broke. The applause started slowly, with one person clapping, then another. Then suddenly, the entire audience was on their feet. But this wasn't the polite, encouraging applause that had followed the other performances. This was the kind of thunderous ovation that Maya remembered from her concert days, the kind that said the audience had just witnessed something extraordinary. Maya stood up from the piano bench on unsteady legs and turned to face the crowd. The faces looking back at her were filled with amazement, confusion, and pure joy. In the front row, she could see a woman wiping tears from her eyes. Near the back, an elderly man was shaking his head in disbelief, still clapping enthusiastically. But it was the faces of her classmates that made her own eyes fill with tears. Jessica was standing in the wings with her mouth hanging open, her hands pressed to her cheeks. Robert was clapping so hard his face was red. Linda had both hands over her heart, looking like she might cry from happiness. As Maya walked off the stage, she was immediately surrounded by her fellow students. But instead of the accusations or anger she had feared, they embraced her with pure excitement. "Maya, that was incredible," Jessica exclaimed, grabbing her hands. "I had no idea you could play like that. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Where on earth did that come from?" Robert asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "I mean, last week you were struggling with scales, and tonight you played like a professional." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I need to explain," she said quietly. "I need to tell you all something." But before she could continue, Professor Williams appeared at her side, gently taking her arm. "Let's give Maya a moment to catch her breath. he said to the group. She'll have plenty of time to talk with everyone at the reception. The reception after the recital was held in the community center's main hall. Tables were set up with cookies, coffee, and punch, and the room buzzed with conversation about the evening's performances. But Maya noticed that most of the talk seemed to center around her unexpected transformation. She stood near the refreshment table, trying to work up the courage to approach her classmates, when a stranger walked up to her. It was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, pulled back in an elegant bun. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "Are you the young lady who played the Chopin piece tonight?" Maya nodded nervously. "Yes, that was me. I'm Dr. Peterson. I teach piano at the university, and I wanted to tell you that your performance was absolutely stunning. I've been teaching for 30 years, and I rarely hear playing with that level of artistry." She paused, studying Maya's face carefully. "Have we met before? You look familiar somehow?" Maya's heart started racing. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. "I don't think so," she said carefully. "I'm just a student in the adult education program here." Dr. Peterson looked puzzled, but didn't press the issue. "Well, if you ever decide you want to perform more seriously, please don't hesitate to contact me. We're always looking for talented pianists for our community concert series." As Dr. Peterson walked away, Maya realized she was shaking. It was starting already, the recognition, the opportunities, the pressure to perform. Everything she had run away from 14 years ago was beginning to creep back into her life. "Maya," came a voice from across the room. She turned to see Jessica approaching with Linda and Robert close behind. "We've been looking everywhere for you. You disappeared right after your performance." Maya took a deep breath. She owed these people the truth. They had been nothing but kind and supportive to her for months, and she had been lying to them the entire time. "Can we sit down somewhere?" she asked. "I have something I need to tell you all." They found a quiet corner with a small table and 4 chairs. Maya's hands were trembling as she sat down, but she forced herself to look each of her friends in the eye. "I haven't been completely honest with you," she began. "When I enrolled in Professor Williams' class, I told everyone I was a complete beginner, but that wasn't true." Jessica leaned forward, her expression confused but patient. "Hey, what do you mean?" Maya closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. When she opened them again, the words came pouring out. "I used to be a professional pianist. I started performing when I was very young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was a teenager. I was playing with major orchestras and recording albums. People called me a child prodigy." The table fell silent. Robert's eyes grew wide, and Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "I performed at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, concert halls all over the world," Maya continued. "But the pressure was incredible. I had no normal childhood, no friends, my own age, no life outside of music. Every day was about practice, performances, and being perfect. By the time I turned 18, I was having panic attacks before every concert. I felt like I was suffocating." Jessica reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "So you stopped playing?" "I walked away from everything," Maya said, tears starting to flow. "I canceled my contracts, fired my manager, and disappeared from the music world completely. I moved across the country, changed my name slightly, and tried to build a normal life. For 14 years, I barely touched a piano." "Why did you come to our class?" Linda asked gently. "If you could already play so beautifully." Maya wiped her eyes with the tissue Jessica handed her. "Because I missed music so much it hurt. But I was terrified of getting pulled back into that world. I thought maybe if I started over as a beginner, I could learn to love playing again without all the pressure and expectations." Robert was shaking his head in amazement. "So when Professor Williams gave you that difficult piece, already knew it by heart," Maya admitted. "But I was terrified to play it well because I knew it would raise questions." "Why didn't you just tell us?" Jessica asked. "We would have understood." Maya looked around the table at these 3 people who had become so important to her. "Because you all accepted me as I was. You didn't care that I was slow to learn or that I made mistakes. You just wanted to share your love of music with me. I had never experienced anything like that before."
Oh.
Linda's eyes were filled with tears now, too. "Oh, Maya, you must have been so lonely carrying that secret." I was, Maya said. But tonight, when I was sitting at that piano, I realized something. The problem was never the music itself. The problem was that other people controlled how and when and why I played. Tonight, for the first time in my adult life, I played because I wanted to share something beautiful with people I care about. Robert leaned back in his chair, still processing everything. So what happens now? Are you going back to performing professionally? Maya shook her head. I don't know. I honestly don't know what comes next. Tonight changed everything, but I'm not sure what it changed into. Just then, Professor Williams approached their table. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. But Maya, there are several people who would like to speak with you. Dr. Peterson from the university is back. And there's a reporter from the local newspaper who heard about your performance. Maya felt that familiar panic starting to rise in her chest. The spotlight was finding her again, just like she had feared. But then Jessica squeezed her hand. Whatever you decide to do, she said firmly, you don't have to do it alone anymore. We're your friends, and we'll support you no matter what. Linda nodded in agreement. Whether you want to go back to concert halls or just keep playing in our little class, we'll be here for you. Robert grinned. Though I have to say it's going to be pretty hard to follow your act at our next recital. Maya laughed through her tears, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with applause or recognition. For the first time in her life, she had friends who knew her secret and loved her anyway. Why, she had people who cared about her as a person, not just as a performer. Looking around the table at their faces, Maya realized that maybe this was what healing actually looked like. Not hiding from who she was, but finding people who would accept all of her, the scared. The woman who had run away from music and the gifted artist who had never really stopped loving it. I think, she said slowly, I'd like to keep taking your class, Professor Williams. But maybe we could work on some duets. I'd love to play with my friends. The smiles that broke across their faces told Maya everything she needed to know. Whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. 3 months after the recital that changed everything, Maya woke up on a Saturday morning to the sound of laughter coming from her living room. She smiled before even opening her eyes, knowing exactly what she would find when she got up. Sure, enough. Jessica was sitting at Maya's piano, slowly working through a simple batch piece while Robert stood behind her, offering encouragement and occasionally pointing out notes on the sheet music. Linda was in the kitchen making coffee, humming along to Jessica's playing. Good morning, sleepyhead, Linda called out when she saw Maya emerge from her bedroom. We let ourselves in with the spare key. Hope you don't mind. What? Maya stretched and grinned. I told you that key was for emergencies only. This is an emergency, Robert declared dramatically. Jessica was about to give up on this batch piece, and we couldn't let that happen. These Saturday morning practice sessions had become a regular tradition after Maya's revelation at the recital. What had started as occasional get-togethers had evolved into a weekly gathering where the 4 friends would practice together, share music, simply enjoy each other's company. Maya poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down on her couch, watching Jessica work through the challenging passage. It still amazed her how much joy she found in these simple moments. For years, she had thought that playing piano meant pressure, competition, and constant judgment. But sitting here with her friends, she was rediscovering what music could be when it was shared with love instead of performed for approval. Maya, can you show me this part again?
Yes.
Jessica asked, pointing to a particularly tricky measure. No, you said you'd help me work it out. Maya walked over to the piano and sat down next to Jessica on the bench. Remember, it's not about playing it fast, she said, demonstrating the passage slowly. Think of it like telling a story. Each note has something to say. As she played, Maya marveled at how natural it felt to teach. After her recital performance, several people had suggested she should return to professional performing, but Maya had discovered something unexpected. She loved sharing music even more than she loved playing it for audiences the week after the recital had been overwhelming. The local newspaper had run a story about the mystery pianist who had stunned everyone at the community center. Dr. Peterson from the university had called 3 times, offering her performance opportunities. A talent agent had somehow tracked down her phone number and left several voicemails about getting back in the game. But Maya had turned them all down, not because she was afraid anymore, but because she had found something better. "Why have some news?" she announced as her friends gathered around the piano. "Professor Williams asked me to co-teach the beginner class with him next semester." "That's wonderful," Linda exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "You'll be such a good teacher." Maya felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Teaching had never been part of her original plan, but it felt right in a way that performing for strangers never had. She loved seeing the moment when a struggling student finally understood a concept, or when someone played a simple melody with genuine joy on their face. "There's more," Maya continued. "The community center wants to start a program for adults who used to play instruments but stopped for various reasons. They asked me to help design it." Robert raised his eyebrows. "Adults like you mean? People who walked away from music and want to come back?" Maya nodded. "Exactly. Turns out there are more people like me than I thought. People who loved music but got burned out by the pressure, or who had to stop playing because of life circumstances, or who were told they weren't good enough and gave up." The idea had come to her during one of her conversations with Professor Williams. He had mentioned meeting several adults over the years who had musical backgrounds, but were too intimidated to join regular classes. Some had been told as children that they had no talent. Others had been pushed so hard that music became associated with stress rather than joy. "I want to create a safe space for people to reconnect with music," Maya explained. "Not to become professional performers, but just to remember why they fell in love with it in the first place." Jessica smiled. "It's like what this class did for you." "Exactly like what this class did for me," Maya agreed. Over the next few hours, they practiced together, with Maya occasionally offering gentle guidance or demonstrating techniques. But mostly, she just enjoyed the music and the friendship. Was working on a jazz piece that challenged his rhythmic skills. Linda was learning a beautiful classical guitar arrangement that she planned to play for her grandchildren. Jessica was still determined to master that batch piece, despite its difficulties. As the morning progressed, Maya reflected on how much her life had changed since that terrifying night when she had been forced to choose between hiding and revealing herself. The choice to be authentic had opened doors she never could have imagined. 2 weeks ago, she had received a letter that had made her cry. It was from a woman named Patricia, who had read the newspaper article about Maya's story. Patricia wrote that she had been a violinist in high school and college, but had stopped playing after a harsh critic told her she would never be good enough for professional music. That was 30 years ago, and she hadn't touched her violin. "Since your story made me realize that maybe the problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough," Patricia had written. "Maybe the problem was that I was measuring my worth by someone else's standards. I got my violin out of the closet yesterday and played for the first time in 3 decades. Felt like coming home." Maya had started a small collection of similar letters. People who had read about her experience and found the courage to return to instruments they had abandoned. A man who had stopped playing guitar after his band broke up. A woman who had given up singing after being told her voice wasn't pretty enough. A teenager who had quit piano lessons because his teacher was too critical. Each letter reminded Maya that her story wasn't really about her at all. It was about the universal human need to express ourselves creatively, and how easily that need could be crushed by fear, criticism, or unrealistic expectations. "I've been thinking about something," Maya said, as her friends packed up their music for the day. "What if we performed together? Not a big concert or anything formal, just maybe at the community center's monthly open mic night." The suggestion was met with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Jessica said, though Maya could see the interest in her eyes. "That's exactly why we should do it," Maya replied. "It's not because we're ready, but because we want to share something we love with people who care about us." Robert grinned. "I like the sound of that. What would we play?" Maya had already been thinking about this. "I found this beautiful arrangement of Bridge Over Troubled Water that we could all play together. Jessica on piano, Linda on guitar, Robert on the simple percussion parts, and I could play a harmony line." As they discussed the idea, Maya realized that this was what healing looked like. It's not a dramatic moment of revelation, but the quiet daily choice to engage with life authentically. Not performing to prove her worth, but sharing music because it brought joy to herself and others. That evening, after her friends had left, Maya sat alone at her piano. She played the Chopin Waltz again, the piece that had changed everything. But this time, she wasn't playing it for an audience or to prove anything to anyone. She was playing it simply because she loved the way it sounded, the way it made her feel, the way it connected her to something larger than herself. As the final notes faded away, Maya smiled. Tomorrow she would start planning her new class for returning musicians. Next week, she would begin working with Professor Williams to design a curriculum that emphasized joy over perfection. Next month, she might even perform with her friends at the open mic night. But tonight, she was simply Maya, not a former prodigy, not a failed performer, not a woman running from her past. She was someone who had learned that the most beautiful music comes not from perfect technique or flawless performance, but from the courage to be authentically yourself and share that authenticity with others. She closed the piano lid gently and headed to bed, already looking forward to next Saturday's practice session with her friends. After 14 years of silence, Maya had finally found her voice again. And this time, she was using it to help others find theirs too. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the quiet suburban street as Michael stepped out of his rental car. After months of high-stress missions in places he couldn't even name, the peaceful neighborhood felt like stepping into another world. Birds chirped from oak trees that lined the sidewalk, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted from nearby houses. This was exactly what he needed. His younger sister Lisa had been begging him to visit for months. Every phone call ended the same way. "When are you coming home, big brother?" Today, he finally had an answer. His commanding officer had practically forced him to take leave, saying he looked more tired than a soldier should. Michael didn't argue. He was tired. Bone deep. Tired in a way that only came from carrying the weight of other people's lives in his hands. Lisa's house sat at the end of Maple Street. A modest 2-story home with a wraparound porch and flower boxes under every window. The garden out front exploded with colors: purple petunias, yellow marigolds, and red roses that climbed up a white trellis. It looked exactly like something Lisa would create, full of life and warmth. Before he could knock, the front door swung open. Lisa practically bounced down the steps, her arms already reaching for him. At 28, she still hugged like she was afraid he might disappear if she didn't hold tight enough. "I can't believe you're actually here," she said, stepping back. To look at him, "You're too skinny." "And when did you get so many gray hairs?" Michael laughed, the first real laugh he'd had in months. "Gray hairs are a sign of wisdom, little sister. Gray hairs are a sign you need a vacation. Good thing you're in the right place." She grabbed his duffel bag, despite his protests, and led him inside. The house felt like Lisa, warm, welcoming, and organized in a way that made sense. Family photos covered the mantel, including several of Michael in his dress uniform that made him slightly uncomfortable. A bookshelf in the corner overflowed with medical journals, mixed with romance novels. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls. "I took the whole week off work," Lisa announced, pulling a tray of fresh rolls from the oven.
The hospital owes me about 6 months of vacation time, so they couldn't complain.
"We're going to do absolutely nothing productive?" Raise an eyebrow, you. "Do nothing productive?" "I'll believe it when I see it." "Okay, fine. We're going to do fun, non-work things. There's a farmer's market tomorrow, and the community center is having their annual barbecue on Saturday. Oh, and Mrs. Rodriguez next door is teaching me to make proper tamales on Sunday." As if summoned by her name, an elderly woman appeared at the kitchen window. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted Michael. "That's Mrs. Rodriguez," Lisa explained unnecessarily. "She's convinced I'm too skinny and has made it her personal mission to feed me. Fair warning, she's going to try to adopt you too." Next few hours passed in a blur of catching up. Lisa told him about her work at the county hospital, how she'd started volunteering at the community health clinic on weekends, and her latest project turning the empty lot behind her house into a neighborhood garden. Michael found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. listening to stories about normal problems like convincing the city council to approve the garden permits and dealing with a coworker who kept stealing her lunch from the break room. Refrigerator. You should see the tomatoes old Mr. Peterson is growing, Lisa said, pointing toward the backyard. The man has magic hands. Last week he brought me a basket so big I had to give half to the food bank. Michael looked out the kitchen window and saw the beginnings of what would clearly become an impressive garden. Raised beds outlined a space about the size of a tennis court, with stakes marking where different vegetables would grow. A small shed sat in one corner, painted the same cheerful yellow as Lisa's front door. The whole neighborhood got involved, Lisa continued. Even the teenagers from the high school come by after classes to help with the heavy lifting. Shh. It's bringing everyone together in a way I never expected. You always were good at that, Michael said. Bringing people together. Remember when? You came home from basic training and you were so serious all the time? I made you help me with that charity car wash, and by the end of the day you were laughing and covered in soap suds. Michael remembered. He'd been 19 and convinced. That military service meant never letting his guard down. Lisa had other ideas. She dragged him to what felt like every community event in town until he remembered how to be a person instead of just a soldier. That evening, they sat on the front porch as the sun set. Neighbors walked by, walking dogs or pushing strollers, and Lisa knew everyone by name. She waved to the Johnson family across the street, called out to ask how Mrs. Chen's new grandbaby was doing, and promised to drop off soup for old Mr. Williams, who'd been fighting a cold. You've built something special here, Michael observed. It's not just me. This whole street is like a big extended family. When the Pattersons' house caught fire last year, half the neighborhood showed up with clothes and casseroles before the fire department even left. When little Tommy broke his arm, 3 different people offered to drive his mom to the hospital. Michael watched a group of kids ride bicycles in the street, their parents chatting on various porches. It felt like something from a different era, a place where people still looked out for each other. I worry sometimes, Lisa admitted quietly. There's been some tension lately. A few incidents in the next town over. People getting harassed, spray paint on buildings. Nothing here yet, but it makes me nervous. What kind of incidents? The ugly kind. People targeting families who don't look like them, saying terrible things. The police chief says it's just isolated cases, but I don't know. It feels like something's building. Michael felt his shoulders tense automatically, the protective instincts. That never fully switched off coming online. Are you safe here? Of course I'm safe. This is home. These people are my family. She gestured toward the houses around them. Mrs. Rodriguez brings me soup when I'm sick. Mr. Peterson fixes my car when it makes weird noises. The kids next door shovel my sidewalk in winter without being asked. We take care of each other. But Michael noticed how she glanced down the street as she spoke, how her hand tightened slightly on her coffee mug. Lisa had always been optimistic, sometimes to a fault. She saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. It was one of the things he loved most about her, and one of the things that worried him most. Maybe I should stay longer than a week, he said. Don't you dare. You need this break, but you also need to get back to your life. I'm fine, Michael. I've been taking care of myself for years. This neighborhood, these people, they're not going anywhere, and neither am I. As if to prove her point, Mr. Peterson appeared at his fence with a basket of fresh vegetables. Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from her house with a plate of something that smelled incredible. The kids on bikes rode by again, shouting friendly hellos. Michael wanted to believe she was right. Looking around at the peaceful street, the caring neighbors, the life his sister had built, it was easy to think that some places were immune to the ugliness he'd seen in other parts of the world. Maybe this corner of suburbia really was different. Maybe here, good people and strong communities were enough to keep the darkness at bay. He had no way of knowing that in less than 72 hours, everything would change forever.